Have you ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew about loyalty, success, and corporate politics shattered in a single heartbeat? Where the people you trusted most revealed who they really were when the stakes got high? Well, buckle up, because what happened to me at the World Innovation Summit will make you question everything you think you know about climbing the corporate ladder. The spotlight burned white-hot against my face as 20,000 industry leaders rose to their feet. The applause thundered through Chicago's Grand Convention Center like a storm breaking over the lake. But here's the question that haunts me: what if I'd known what was coming? Would I have walked off that stage differently? Would you? Casey Doyle. The announcer's voice boomed across the World Innovation Summit. For redefining the landscape of global tech alliances, this year's Innovators Global Award. My heels clicked against the polished stage as I walked toward the podium, my heart hammering against my ribs. 3 years of 16-hour days, missed dinners, and sacrificed weekends had led to this moment. The weight of validation pressed against my chest. Chase Landon waited at center stage, my CEO's familiar smile gleaming under the cameras. Brightshore Ventures had climbed from startup obscurity to industry titan under my leadership, and here he stood, ready to present the award that proved it. "Proud of you," he whispered as his hand found mine for the ceremonial handshake. The cameras flashed like lightning. His grip was firm, confident, but something cold slipped between our palms with practiced precision. A velvet envelope. I assumed it was a personal note, maybe a bonus announcement. Chase loved grand gestures. But this felt different, calculated, timed for maximum impact. As I took the crystal trophy, his eyes held a darkness I'd never seen before, and something that looked almost like satisfaction. The microphone felt ice-cold against my lips as I leaned forward, the audience's expectant faces blurring into a sea of possibility. 3 years ago, Brightshore Ventures was just another name in a crowded market, I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Today, we've forged partnerships that span 6 continents and changed how the world thinks about innovation. The crowd hung on every word. In the front row, I spotted Lyle Hendricks, founder of Hawthorne Dynamics, the partnership I'd been chasing for 18 months. His arms were crossed, but his expression was thoughtful. "Success isn't built in boardrooms," I continued, passion bleeding into my voice. "It's built in the trenches, in the moments when everyone else walks away, when the deal seems impossible. That's where real innovation lives." The applause erupted again, but this time I caught Chase's reflection in the teleprompter screen behind me. Instead of pride, a cryptic smile played at his lips, the kind a chess master wears when executing a long-planned checkmate. His subtle nod toward someone in the front row sent ice through my veins. Something was wrong. "Thank you," I finished, raising the trophy. The cameras captured every angle as I walked backstage, the velvet envelope burning like acid in my palm. In the shadows behind the curtain, I finally opened it. The words hit like a physical blow. Effective immediately, termination of employment. The letters seemed to pulse on the corporate letterhead as blood rushed in my ears. Around me, the backstage chaos continued, technicians adjusting equipment, speakers preparing for their slots. But my world had shrunk to these 9 words. Chase materialized beside me like a predator emerging from tall grass. "You started thinking you ran this place," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't." My fingers tightened around the paper. "You're firing me? Here? Now?" "The board voted yesterday." His smile was blade-thin. "Emergency closed-door session." I presented compelling evidence about strategic restructuring needs and leadership alignment issues. Unanimous decision. "Your replacement starts Monday." The irony was suffocating. They'd called my name for an award while planning my execution. The industry's biggest stage had become my gallows. The Hendricks deal will proceed without you. Chase straightened his tie with surgical precision. Brightshore's future doesn't depend on one person, Casey. Not even you. He walked away, leaving me alone with the sound of my own breathing and the distant applause for the next award recipient. I could have screamed. Could have chased him down, demanded explanations, made a scene that would follow me forever. Instead, I folded the letter, slipped it into my purse, and walked toward the exit with my head high. But my mind was already racing, calculating angles Chase couldn't possibly see. The hotel elevator climbed 30 floors in perfect silence, but my phone buzzed like an angry wasp. Word traveled fast in our industry, faster than truth, faster than context. Casey, I'm getting calls. My assistant's voice crackled through the speaker. Something about restructuring at Brightshore? I closed my eyes. Chase had gotten ahead of the story, spinning my termination as strategic evolution. In 2 hours, he'd probably announce my replacement with fanfare and forward momentum. Tell anyone who asks that I'm exploring new opportunities, I said. Nothing more. The doors opened to reveal my penthouse suite, Brightshore's tab, ironically enough. Lake Michigan stretched endlessly beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, dark water reflecting city lights like scattered diamonds. My laptop screen filled with notifications. Industry blogs. Trade publications. LinkedIn messages from colleagues expressing sympathy and surprise at Brightshore's bold restructuring decision. The narrative was already set. Casey Doyle, brilliant but difficult. Too ambitious. Too aggressive. The company had outgrown her contributions. Chase had been feeding this story to key industry reporters for days before the award ceremony, I realized. The timing wasn't coincidental, it was surgical. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and opened a new document. If Chase wanted to control the story, he'd learned that stories have a way of writing themselves. The cursor blinked expectantly as I typed the first line of my business plan. The clock read 2:47 a.m. when I finally pushed back from my laptop. 12 pages of market analysis, financial projections, and strategic positioning stared back at me through bloodshot eyes. Doyle Dynamics would be lean, agile, everything Brightshore had stopped being. No bureaucracy. No politics. Just results. My phone vibrated, a text from an unknown number. Saw the news. Coffee tomorrow? LH. Lyle Hendricks. The man whose partnership Chase assumed was locked up. I smiled for the first time in hours. Millennium Park Cafe. 9 a.m. His response came immediately, looking forward to it. The bourbon had long since lost its bite, but warmth spread through my chest anyway. In the business world, timing was everything, and Chase had just given me the gift of perfect timing. I opened my contacts and scrolled through 5 years of relationship building. Investment bankers. Venture capitalists. Industry mavens who owed me favors or respected my track record. By dawn, I'd sent 27 carefully crafted messages. Not desperate pleas or bitter complaints, strategic overtures from someone with a plan. The responses started arriving before my coffee finished brewing. Not everyone replied right away, but the ones who did were the ones who mattered. Intrigued. Let's talk. About time you went independent. Call me. I have capital and questions. Chase thought he'd ended my story. He'd actually just handed me the pen. Lyle Hendricks looked exactly like his Forbes profile photo. Silver hair, steel gray eyes, the kind of handshake that communicated volumes without words. "Congratulations on the award," he said, settling into the cafe's corner booth. His tone was polite but measured, clearly reserving judgment. Hell of a way to celebrate afterward. I studied his expression, searching for judgment or pity. Found careful neutrality. "Chase moves fast when he feels threatened," I said simply. Threatened? Something shifted in Lyle's demeanor. Skepticism giving way to genuine curiosity. By an award-winning executive who built his company's reputation. By an award-winning executive who forgot her place. He laughed, a sound like gravel and whiskey, and I saw the exact moment his wariness transformed into respect. "I've built 3 companies from scratch, Casey. Know what I've learned? The people who know their place never build anything worth remembering." Our server appeared with coffee and the kind of studied invisibility that marked expensive establishments. When she left, Lyle leaned forward. "Brightshore's been courting Hawthorne for 18 months. Impressive presentations, solid numbers. But yesterday's performance?" He shook his head. "Chase showed me exactly who he is under pressure." "And who's that?" "Someone who destroys assets to protect ego." Lyle's fingers drummed against his cup. "I prefer partners who build value, not eliminate competition." The words hung between us like a bridge neither of us had expected to find. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. The warehouse space in River North smelled like sawdust and possibility. Exposed brick walls, soaring ceilings, enough square footage for a team of 50 when the time came. 12,000 square feet, move-in ready, the real estate agent said, his enthusiasm barely masking commission calculations. Previous tenant was a design firm. I walked the perimeter, imagining conference rooms where the old drafting tables stood, envisioning workstations beneath those industrial windows. The rent was half what Brightshore paid for their downtown tower, and twice as inspiring. "I'll take it," I said. 2 weeks later, Doyle Dynamics officially existed. Incorporation papers filed. Business accounts opened. Logo designed by a freelancer whose portfolio had caught my eye. The first hire was my former assistant, who'd quit Brightshore the day after my firing. The second was an operations manager I'd been quietly courting during my final weeks at Brightshore, along with 3 other key players I'd identified as talent worth poaching. By month's end, I had 6 people and enough startup capital to run lean for 18 months. Chase's industry whispers hadn't stopped, but they'd evolved. Casey Doyle was bitter. Trying to prove something. Bound to fail without corporate infrastructure. Each rumor only sharpened my focus. The real test came when Lyle scheduled our second meeting, this time at Hawthorne's headquarters, with his full executive team present. "Time to see what you're really made of," he'd said over the phone. I'd been waiting my entire career for that question. Hawthorne Dynamics occupied 4 floors of a glass tower that pierced Chicago's skyline like a crystal spear. The conference room overlooked Grant Park, where autumn leaves painted the landscape in gold and crimson. Lyle sat at the head of a mahogany table surrounded by 5 executives whose combined experience spanned decades. Their faces were politely skeptical, the look of people humoring their boss's latest whim. "Casey Doyle, meet my leadership team," Lyle said. "They have concerns about partnering with a 1-month-old company." The chief operations officer leaned forward. "No offense, MS. Doyle, but Brightshore offered infrastructure, established processes, proven results. What do you offer that they couldn't?" I'd anticipated this question, prepared for it, but the directness still felt like ice water. "Brightshore offered you a junior partnership," I said, meeting each gaze around the table. They wanted to license your innovation, rebrand it, and take primary credit. I'm offering true collaboration. The chief technology officer frowned. Meaning? Joint development. Shared IP. Equal billing in all marketing materials. I opened my laptop and projected financial models onto the wall screen. Brightshore's proposal would net you $200 million over 5 years. Mine delivers $400 million in 3, backed by committed partnership agreements that reduce implementation risk to near zero. Silence stretched across the room like a held breath. The CFO's pen stopped moving. And Lyle's smile told me everything I needed to know. $400 million. The CFO's voice was carefully neutral, but her calculator hadn't stopped clicking since my presentation ended. That's aggressive. That's realistic, I countered. Hawthorne's technology revolutionizes supply chain optimization. Brightshore wanted to treat it like another product line. I want to treat it like the paradigm shift it actually is. Lyle's chief legal counsel cleared his throat. MS. Doyle, with respect, how do we know Doyle Dynamics has the operational capacity to deliver on promises of this magnitude? The question I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Because I'm not building a traditional consulting firm, I said. I'm building a partnership network. Hawthorne wouldn't just be licensing technology, you'd be joining an ecosystem of innovation-driven companies I've been cultivating relationships with for months. I clicked to the next slide, revealing logos of 6 firms I'd been quietly courting since before my termination. Each brings unique capabilities. Combined, we represent $1 billion development and distribution platform. The room's energy shifted. Where skepticism had lived, curiosity now stirred. These companies have committed to partnership agreements, the CTO asked. Pending the anchor relationship, I said, looking directly at Lyle. Hawthorne becomes the cornerstone that makes everything else possible. And honestly, sitting in that boardroom, presenting to executives who could change everything, I realized something profound about resilience and reinvention. Sometimes the biggest betrayals become the greatest opportunities, but only if you're brave enough to bet on yourself. If this story is resonating with you, if you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated in your career, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Lyle stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. The late afternoon sun painted his silhouette against the glass. Gentlemen, ladies, he said without turning around. Clear your calendars for Friday. We're going to need a longer conversation. Friday arrived wrapped in November frost and the kind of gray sky that made decisions feel more consequential. The Hawthorne conference room had been transformed into a war room, white boards covered with financial projections, technology diagrams, and strategic timelines. I'd spent 3 days refining every detail of the partnership proposal. Sleep had become theoretical. Coffee had become religion. Before we begin, Lyle said as his team settled around the table, I have news that changes the context of today's discussion. My stomach dropped. Chase had gotten to him. Brightshore had sweetened their offer. Some legal challenge had emerged. Yesterday, Brightshore Ventures approached us with a revised proposal, Lyle continued. My worst fears confirmed. They're offering $300 million over 5 years, expanded equity sharing, and guaranteed market exclusivity in 3 sectors. The number hit like a physical blow. Chase was playing chess while I'd been playing checkers. It's a strong offer, Lyle said, his expression unreadable. The kind that makes boards happy and shareholders rich. I gripped my portfolio case so tightly my knuckles went white. Everything I'd built in 6 weeks was about to evaporate. But, Lyle continued, and that single word restored my heartbeat, Chase made one critical mistake. He looked directly at me, and I saw something like admiration in his eyes. He assumed I make decisions based only on numbers. Chase Landon is brilliant with spreadsheets, Lyle said, beginning to pace the length of the conference room. His presentation yesterday was flawless. Financial models that would make Harvard business professors weep with joy. The Hawthorne executives exchanged glances, clearly unsure where their CEO was heading. A few shifted uncomfortably. But here's what he missed, what he's always missed, based on our previous interactions. Lyle stopped and faced the table. Business is still fundamentally about people. He clicked a remote, and the wall screen filled with news coverage from my award ceremony. Several board members leaned forward. Chase Landon fired the woman who built his company's reputation while she stood on stage accepting an industry award. In front of 20,000 witnesses. Because she'd become too successful. The chief legal counsel shifted uncomfortably. That's certainly a public relations nightmare. It's a character revelation, Lyle corrected, and I saw nods around the table. When pressure mounts, when egos are threatened, what do people do? Chase destroys. Casey builds. He gestured toward my presentation materials. She lost everything 6 weeks ago and used it as a foundation. I felt heat rising in my cheeks but forced myself to remain silent. Hawthorne Dynamics isn't just buying a partnership, Lyle continued. We're choosing a partner. Someone we'll trust with our core technology, our market strategy, our future. He looked around the room, measuring each face. Who would you rather trust with something that precious? The signature page felt heavier than paper should. My pen hovered over the line marked, Casey Doyle, Chief Executive Officer, Doyle Dynamics, while 18 months of work crystallized into blue ink. $800 million over 4 years, Lyle said, his own pen already moving across the document. Joint intellectual property development. Shared global distribution rights. Equal partnership status. The Hawthorne legal team had spent 3 hours reviewing every clause, every contingency, every protection either side might need. The contract was airtight and revolutionary, exactly what the industry hadn't seen coming. There is one condition, Lyle said as we both set down our pens. My pulse quickened. Last-minute conditions rarely brought good news. I want to be there when you tell Chase. He leaned back in his chair. Not for revenge, for education. I want Brightshore's board to see firsthand what leadership loyalty actually looks like, and what happens when you break it. The audacity of it, the pure, instructive justice, hit me like electricity. When did you have in mind? I asked. Tomorrow. Brightshore's board meeting is at 2 p.m. Chase will be presenting his quarterly results, probably bragging about how smoothly your transition has proceeded. I thought about the award ceremony, about the velvet envelope, about 6 weeks of whispered rumors and carefully constructed sabotage. I'll pick you up at 1:30, I said. The Brightshore Ventures lobby hadn't changed, same marble floors, same abstract art, same reception desk where I'd passed thousands of mornings. But walking through those doors felt like visiting a previous life. Miss Doyle, the security guard said, surprise flickering across his features. We weren't expecting, emergency board presentation, I said smoothly, my visitor's badge already clipped to my jacket. Mr. Hendricks is my witness. His name should be on today's pre-cleared executive guest list. The guard checked his tablet, found Lyle's name, and nodded. Nobody questioned CEOs who moved with purpose, especially ally ones with that kind of industry clout. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt endless and instantaneous. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my breathing remained steady. I'd rehearsed this moment for 6 weeks. Nervous? Lyle asked. Excited, I corrected. The boardroom doors were closed, but Chase's voice carried through the heavy oak, confident, expansive, selling his vision of Brightshore's continued growth. Through the glass panel, I could see 12 board members arranged around the polished table, charts and graphs glowing on the wall screen. Ready? Lyle asked. I straightened my shoulders and knocked. Chase's voice stopped mid-sentence. Footsteps approached the door. When it opened, his face cycled through confusion, recognition, and barely controlled rage in the span of 2 heartbeats. Casey, he said. What the hell are you doing here? Presenting, I said, stepping past Chase into the boardroom before he could react. 12 faces turned toward me, some surprised, others confused, all suddenly alert. My heart hammered against my ribs, but years of high-stakes presentations had taught me to channel adrenaline into laser-focused calm. The board chair, Patricia Fleming, set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. Chase, you didn't mention Miss Doyle would be joining us, she said. She's not. Chase began, but I was already moving toward the presentation screen with practiced confidence masking the electric nervousness underneath. Good afternoon, everyone. I have an announcement that affects Brightshore's strategic planning. I connected my laptop to the display system with practiced efficiency. Specifically, the Hawthorne Dynamics partnership you've been pursuing. Chase's face went pale. Casey, you have no authority to, Mr. Hendricks, would you like to explain? I said, gesturing toward Lyle. He stepped forward with the bearing of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of powerful people. Ladies and gentlemen, effective today, Hawthorne Dynamics has entered into an exclusive partnership with Doyle Dynamics. The agreement encompasses all technology licensing, joint development, and global distribution rights that were previously under discussion with Brightshore. The silence was profound. I watched understanding dawn across 12 faces simultaneously. Board member Jackson Monroe leaned forward. Lyle, this is unexpected. We were told the partnership was proceeding on schedule. It is, Lyle said. Just not with Brightshore. Chase found his voice. This is a conflict of interest. Casey signed non-compete agreements, which expired upon termination, I said, my smile carefully controlled. I checked. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Patricia Fleming's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. Chase, perhaps you could explain how we lost an $800 million partnership to a competitor that didn't exist 8 weeks ago? Chase's jaw worked silently for several seconds. I could practically hear the gears grinding as he searched for an explanation that wouldn't end his career. Casey was let go, for strategic reasons, he finally managed. The board voted. The board voted to terminate our most successful dealmaker 2 months before the biggest partnership in company history? Board member Catherine Ross's tone could have frozen Lake Michigan. Whose strategic thinking was that? I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy watching Chase realize his carefully constructed narrative was crumbling in real time. The decision was mine, he said. Casey had become difficult to manage. Insubordinate. Insubordinate? Lyle's eyebrows rose. She seemed remarkably easy to work with during our negotiations. The boardroom door opened and Chase's assistant appeared, tablet in hand. Mr. Landon, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Bloomberg is calling about a story they're running. Something about executive management and the Hawthorne deal? The color drained from Chase's face entirely. How did, he began, then stopped, looking directly at me. I shrugged. I called them this morning. Thought the industry deserved transparency about partnership decisions and leadership practices. Patricia Fleming stood up. Chase, we need to talk. Privately. But I wasn't finished yet. Before you do, I said, there's one more thing. I clicked to my final slide, a press release scheduled to go live in 30 minutes. Doyle Dynamics is announcing our series of funding round. Led by Summit Ridge Ventures, with participation from 5 venture firms and 2 private equity groups. I paused, letting the numbers sink in. $50 million in initial funding, with plans to scale rapidly. The press release included photos from the contract signing, quotes from Lyle about revolutionary partnership models, and a detailed breakdown of how traditional consulting was evolving. The story goes live at 3 p.m. across all major industry publications, I continued. I thought Brightshore's board should hear it first, as a professional courtesy. Chase looked like he'd been physically struck. This is what happens, I said, closing my laptop and gathering my materials, when you mistake fear for leadership. When you destroy talent instead of nurturing it. When you think one person's success diminishes your own. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. For what it's worth, Chase, I learned everything I know about closing deals from working here. Brightshore taught me to be ruthless when necessary, strategic always, and completely focused on winning. I smiled one last time. Thanks for the education. In the elevator, Lyle chuckled. You know he'll probably be fired by the end of the week? Probably, I agreed. But that's not why I did it. No. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, where autumn's sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. I did it because he was right about one thing, I said as we walked toward the exit. I don't know my place. I pushed through the revolving door and stepped onto the sidewalk, where the future waited like an open road. I make my own, and I'm not waiting for anyone to tell me where it is. And that's exactly what I want you to remember from this story. Whether you're stuck in a toxic workplace, overlooked for promotions, or told you're too ambitious, you have more power than you realize. Sometimes the biggest plot twist in your career story is realizing you don't need anyone's permission to rewrite the ending. If this story inspired you, challenged you, or reminded you of your own corporate battles, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time you had to bet on yourself. I read every single one and your stories fuel these videos. And if you're ready for more stories about turning setbacks into comebacks, about finding your power when others try to take it away, make sure you're subscribed because trust me, Casey's story is just the beginning. There's so much more where this came from. Until next time, remember, they can fire you from a job, but they can't fire you from your destiny.